The Marshall Thundering Herd, going from the hunter to the hunted. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We'll get a little bit more regular, as they say, here. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. The move is complete. You can see a nice new background. We got a little Robo-Show honor back there from the Raging Cajuns. Got the Locked On Sunbelt up, got the books up. Could show you what's over here, but you may think less of me, or you may think more of me, because maybe we'll get to that a little bit later on. Anyway, we're going to start to not only wrap up spring football and hopefully talk to some more football coaches, but we're also going to look into baseball as well. Hopefully this week we will have Mark Halvey on from the South Alabama Jaguars and Coach Gilmore from the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. But today's episode is the Marshall Thundering Herd, and it is brought to you by this episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. Marshall wrapped up spring football last week, a couple weeks ago, I guess, technically. And we got our buddy Lou Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch talking Marshall Thundering Herd. They're going from the hunter to the hunted. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Let's talk a little Marshall Thundering Herd with our buddy Lou Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch. Why don't you put a bow on Marshall spring practice? Because it kind of feels like this year they're going from the hunter to the hunted. So I wonder, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we'll talk about that later. How do you put a bow on the spring? Let me just start out that way.
Yeah, I think it was a competitive spring. It was kind of unique in the fact that, Huff kind of took a step back from, the X's and O's and being involved in directly in the install, and kind of let a lot of his coordinators do a lot of that. I think, which is good when you've got a similar system and a new defensive coordinator, and kind of letting the assistants do their thing. And so that was different for him and different to watch. He never once put a headset on. He was always kind of lurking in the background and taking things in. And I think what he saw is what a lot of us saw in the spring game on Saturday, and that was they're really trying to build the depth versus reinforce, kind of what they already know from the starters. You didn't see a ton of reps from guys like Rasheen Ali or Cam Fancher, Eli Neal on the defensive side, Owen Porter. Those guys didn't play much in the spring game, and some of them were limited through the spring in practice. And it was kind of one of those things like, what they're going to bring. Guys like that. But, how do you evaluate the depth you have on the roster? You give them more reps and give them, have some more to look at on film from some of those guys that are the 2s, 3s, and even 4s, through spring. So I think that was what was fun to watch throughout the spring. And then, of course, at the spring game, they had between 5,000 and 6,000 fans show up, which was a good afternoon in Huntington. And there's some excitement around the program coming into this year after the success they had last year, because I know you and I have talked about this before. They were right there in several games that didn't go their way, and still ended up winning 9 games, right. 8 in the regular season in the bowl game. So I think it's an exciting new season ahead for Marshall, and certainly with a mix of knowns and unknowns as far as it goes to personnel.
What X's and O's have changed? Are they changing schemes?
I don't think they're necessarily changing schemes, especially on offense, because I think they're going to stick to their guns there. They found something that worked last year, and that was kind of a mix of run and pass, but it was run heavy, because you had Cam Fancher, who is a runner first most times. That's just kind of his natural tendency is to tuck it in and run. And then you had a guy like Kalen LeBourne, who was good for 25 or 30 carries a game. And so Not that they had to be run first last year, but it's what worked for them. And I think they built everything off of that running game, and I think you're going to see more of that this year. With the return of Rasheen Ali, a fully healthy Rasheen Ali, I should say. He played in the final 3 games last year, but, had that knee brace on his left knee and never really looked like himself. But he's looked good, when he's taken reps this spring and said he feels better than he ever has. So I think that's a good sign for the Marshall offense. And, I think it's still going to start with the running backs. It did last year, and maybe that looks different. Rasheen Ali is different from Kalen LeBourne in the fact that he's not going to carry 25 or 30 times a game. He might get 20 touches. Maybe it's, 12 carries and 8 catches. Maybe that's extreme. But, he has the ability to catch out of the backfield, as well as A.J. Turner, who got into some games last year but didn't play a whole lot. And so I think you're going to see more of the catching ability from the running backs out of the backfield. And then there's a receiver group that just has a lot to prove, I think. Of course, you lose leading receiver Corey Gamage to the transfer portal. He had led the team in receiving the last 3 years, but they brought in guys like DeMarcus Harris from Kentucky, who had a good camp and flashed a bit in the spring game. Guys like Brian Robinson, who transferred from Florida State last year, didn't play much, but he has a chance to step up. And then guys that have been in the program for 3 or 4 years now, Charles Montgomery, Caleb McMillan, Talik Keaton, those guys are going to be mainstays in that wide receiver group. But they've got to prove that, they have the ability to make big plays out there. I think one of the things that was kind of surprising to hear Huff say this spring was, he's like, man, we're catching the ball, and that shouldn't surprise me. But he said,
and it does.
Last year, there were some drops, and drops were a problem, and especially in big spots. But that hadn't necessarily been a problem this year. So far, of course, they haven't seen another team. They've been going against their own defense, which in itself has been proven to be pretty good. But I think still. The offense stays the same. And the defense, there's some nuances there that are unique to Jason Seymour and his coaching style. But the meat and potatoes of what they did last year is still there. I think that's what Huff was looking for in a defensive coordinator, was someone who was in the same realm as Guidry, but could bring his own flair to it. And I think Jason's done a good job of that.
All right, let's take a timeout. We'll get back with Luke Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch talking Marshall Thundering Herd. We'll talk to him about the quarterback situation. But first, let's talk a little FanDuel. And we got the NBA playoffs heating up. We got a little Steph. We got a little LeBron. My goodness. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm actually looking forward to that Steph and LeBron playoff series. It should be a good one. All right, let's get back to Luke Creasy of the Herald-Dispatch talking Marshall Thundering Herd. And was there a true quarterback competition in the spring? Talking to Luke Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch talking Marshall Thundering Herd, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, everybody always wants to know about the quarterback. We all figured it was Cam Fancher's job going into spring. Is that where we stand? Was it his job? Is it his job? Tell us about the Marshall Thundering Herd quarterback situation.
Yeah, I think he's still the clear-cut one, because we didn't see him in the spring game, and that was kind of the story for all of the expected starters, is they didn't play. But what Cam did get a chance to do in the spring game, he got to be the offensive coordinator for one of the
really?
teams. So he got to call the plays and kind of understand the offense, and I think that shows a level of confidence in him, and just the fact that they're willing to hand the playbook to him and say, okay, let's see how much you know of it. So I think he's the clear-cut one. He looked good in spring ball throughout the practices. And the unique thing about it is, and they were in the same situation last year, they had 6 quarterbacks in the spring, and then ended up again with 6 quarterbacks in the fall because there was one that transferred after spring. And then, of course, they added Henry Columbia in the summer last year. So this year they entered with 6 quarterbacks on the spring roster. Now they're down to 5. Cade Cunningham entered the transfer portal yesterday, he announced. And so I think it was a battle between Cade Cunningham and Cole Pennington for the 2 at this point. And so, without Cade Cunningham in the mix, I think Cole is probably holding on to that backup spot right now, Cole Pennington. And then behind him, there's some guys that, are just still looking to separate themselves from the crowd. And I think Cole can be mixed in there too. The benefit that Cole has is he was on the scout team last year and understand that kind of helps you get used to the speed of the game. And, of course, you're going against the defensive one. So that's undoubtedly going to help him. And he said that, and Coach has said that too. There's a mixture of talent, when you get beyond Cam Fancher and Cole Pennington. Colin Parachek, a kid who transferred from Morehead State, and some other freshmen mixed in there as well. So I think it's Cam is the 1 and Cole is the 2 going into summer, and then we'll see what happens from there. But I personally can't imagine a scenario where Cam Fancher's not the 1. I think he proved it. He went 6-1 as a starter at the end of last year, and in a relatively limited offense without the dynamic element of Rasheen Ali in there. So I think he's probably the favorite to be the starter right now, but Huff is as tight-lipped as anybody in the country when it comes to announcing a starter. So we're still probably a few months away from knowing for sure, but I don't see a world in which Cam doesn't start the season opener.
So is that a week-to-week thing with Huff, or it's one thing when we find out about it? When does he like to have a starting quarterback? Like this is not a big secret who's going to be the starting quarterback. It appears right now. The longer he goes without announcing it, it makes it appear like it's a secret. Of course, he could tell them and not tell us.
Yes, yeah, but I really don't think he told anybody last year because he was kind of he held it out until the very last scrimmage of fall. He said, we're going to do this drill and send the quarterbacks out there and say, okay, do it. And whichever one does it better, that's who's the starter. And is that a good way to do it? I don't know. But, I think there's probably a feeling.
Isn't it like flipping a coin?
Yeah, it feels like it. It felt like it at times. But, Huff knows his players. And so, I think this year is a little bit different in the fact that, you don't have a guy with 6 or 5 years of experience in the room like Henry Columbia did. But, too, that gives him a chance to give players equal reps throughout camp. And so I think Cam Fancher is going to get, reps. Cole Pennington's going to get reps. Colin Parachek's going to get reps. They're going to get reps until somebody separates themselves behind Fancher, and then I think you'll see, the race come down, to those last few weeks of fall camp before the season starts. And so it'll be fun to watch. But from what I've gathered, they've liked Cam's progression this offseason, which I think is important. Because you can improve week to week in the season, but what do you do in the off season to get even better? It's another year under his belt in the system. And so I think that helps him out. Some of the guys in the offensive line have openly come out and said that their confidence is in Cam. And I think that goes a long way to kind of unofficially deciding a starter. Of course, he's not going to do it until much later into fall camp. But, like I said, I think this is Cam Fancher's team, and I think he kind of proved that last year.
All right, let's take one more timeout. We'll wrap up things with Luke Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch. We'll talk about Marshall Thundering Herd head coach Charles Huff. But first, again, let me give you my thanks, I should say, for, hanging with me. Again, a little bit of a move from Mobile to Lafayette. We're a little bit more settled and looking forward to, wrapping up spring football. getting into baseball. And again, we are like 10 days away from the Sun Belt Conference tournament coming to Lafayette. Of course, it'll be hosted by the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, who, have only won 80 straight Sun Belt series. So it should be an interesting time. And hopefully my radio show on 103.3 The GOAT will actually be live from Lamson Park here in Lafayette. If you're coming by, be sure to say hello. Again, thanks very much. I know it's been a little bit, I guess irregular would be the proper way of saying it, but we will be we'll be much more consistent moving forward. Okay. All right. Let's wrap things up with Luke Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch, covering the Marshall Thundering Herd, talking head coach Charles Huff. He's heading into year number 3, how he has adapted as a head coach. Talking to Luke Creasy, Herald-Dispatch, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Let's talk a little bit about Charles Huff. He's going into his 3rd season as the head coach with the Marshall Thundering Herd. I'm not sure we ever see him without a big smile on his face. How has he adapted to being a head coach up there in West Virginia?
I think he has a really great understanding of how to build a culture, and that's something I've seen grow for Marshall, and I think that is, one of the things that he did almost immediately was latch on to the relational aspect of what Marshall University is within itself and to the community around it. I think he really gets that. That community connection. And I think that's gone a long way into, helping build the culture. But, one of the things he says that, if you have a chance to watch practice and watch him play, is that if you don't play hard, you don't play for Charles Huff. And so I think, that balance of being relational, but also trying to push your players to get the most out of themselves and to get the most out of your team, is something he's done really well. And so you can tell year to year, he's getting more comfortable as a head coach. Of course, this is his first, opportunity as a head coach. He's been in some big time programs and some big time situations. He's coached in national championship games and, been around some of the best running backs, that are now in the NFL, Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders, he's been around those guys and helped coach them up. Najee Harris, he coached at Alabama. So he's been in these big time situations and seen how, the big programs are run, the big Power Fives. And I think he's trying to bring a little of that to Marshall, which is a little bit different for a school of Marshall size. Because, things at that level sometimes, they run a tight ship and, they expect the most out of you every single day. And I'm not saying that's uncommon across lower levels of college football or at the group of 5 level, but the expectation that he has for his players, he also holds himself to. And I think that goes a long way. But it's been fun to watch the Charles Huff era develop. And, like you said, he is a character, and he knows how to put on a good face and, and get the most out of everybody. And today's his birthday actually too. So I saw that going around Twitter, which was kind of funny because Brett McMurphy wished him a happy birthday and said he was the 4th youngest coach in the MAC. And Marshall hadn't been in the MAC for 18 years. So that was kind of
funny. We're talking to Luke Creasy, Herald-Dispatch, Locked On Sunbelt. All right, let's talk about expectations because they were, not picked very high to do very much last year. And now I'm sure they're going to be picked much higher this season, although it does appear like the East is wide open. We'll see, the portal is closing in the weekend. And we'll see if one Grayson McCall sticks around. It appears that he is for now. So we'll see if that changes. But, everybody else seems to be looking for a quarterback on that side of the division. Troy's probably going to have to go through that, right? Going from the Hunter to the Hunted. South Alabama kind of got through that last year. We'll see what happens this season. The Cajuns have been through it. How is Charles Huff and the team kind of dealing with, high expectations, right? Division title, Sun Belt championship, all of that. We're not just looking, we want to win 6 games in a bowl game. I presume they're dealing with, we want more after last season.
Yeah, and I think some of the players will definitely agree there. I was talking to Mike Abraham the other day, and he said one of the reasons that he came back was because he didn't accomplish all of the goals he wanted to. Owen Porter said the same thing. This team wants a conference title, but knows how hard it is to get back to that level of because they were playing some really good football down the stretch last year. After kind of an up and down start, but I think they realized that the work they put in got them to where they were, and I think it's going to be largely the same approach as they had last year. You're not going to hear a lot of guys talk about we're looking already at the conference championship. We know we're going to be there. They're going to take it week by week as they continue through this, and but I think the expectation is to be right in the mix. And I think that's the expectation in house and really from, outward, from the fan base, after they see a taste of those 9 wins, and of course, you had the highs like a win over Notre Dame and, winning the bowl game. And so I think when you give fans a taste of that, they want more. And I think the team wants more too. So I think it's realistic to say that they'll hit that 9-win mark again. At least they have the capability to, if they can get all the pieces together. I think last time I was on the show, I think I predicted 10, total. So I don't think it's unrealistic that this team has the ability to play for a conference title. Because I think they had it last year, just had some lapses at times, and lost a tight game to Troy on the road. Blew it against Coastal Carolina at home early. They got down by 3 touchdowns before, Huff got a chance to turn around. And so I think that when you look at what went right last year and what went wrong, the wrongs are relatively easy to correct. And they realized that they had things in front of them last year and weren't but a game or two off from playing in that conference title game. And I think it's, there's a drive to get back to that level, but to actually play for a title this time. And I think that's part of the excitement around the program right now.
Luke Creasy, Herald-Dispatch. I'm sure the Eagles Super Bowl pullover is just coincidental talking to a Patriots fan. I'm sure you're not trolling me whatsoever.
Hey, I am just gearing up for the draft. Got 2 first-round picks this year.
Right.
Philly does.
Right.
So I am just gearing up for Thursday, and we'll see what happens. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're a Patriots fan.
Right. Highly unlikely. Yeah. I don't believe you for a second.
I would have worn my Super Bowl 52 polo had it been about the Patriots, or my Nick Foles jersey.
Got it. Right. That would have been worse. Agreed. Any chance of a Luke Creasy appearance for the Sun Belt Softball Championship here in Lafayette?
There's a potential. Okay. I'm still trying to work out some X's and O's and see if I can, take off one of my hats back here and put on my my sports writer hat for that weekend. And then trying to figure out how to get down there. It looks like if I do, I'm driving. So it's about a 4th. Yeah, so we'll see, but it's certainly there's some good softball being played around the league. I was at Marshall's game yesterday. They beat number 24 Virginia Tech, and of course they had Alabama in town last week, which was fun too. So, but yeah, I'm hoping to get down there, and if I do, I'll see you there.
Well, if you're driving, that means you're going through Kentucky, if my geography is right. So pick me up some good bourbon. I really don't have much.
Sounds good. I'll take care of it.
He's Luke Creasy from the Herald-Dispatch, Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. Always appreciate your time, Luke. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.